Hello, everyone, and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 683. 683, February the 4th, 2019, Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's get to it. It looks like that the Defense Department is sending 3,750 additional troops to the border. This will now raise the troop level on the border to 4,350 troops. And they will be primary objective for the most recent group that was sent there will be to lay out 150 miles of concertina wire. That's a lot of concertina wire. And it's not a fun job, believe me. I've done it. Concertina wire, it's people call it razor wire. It's pretty difficult to handle. You cut your hands up. It's a pain in the butt to deal with, to unwrap and then to stretch out. It's just, it's not fun to do. But they're going to do a lot of 150 miles is a lot of concertina wire. So that's what they're going to be doing, of course. We have 3 caravans currently heading in our direction toward the southern border. I'm not sure if they're heading toward the Tijuana side or if they're going to go eastward and try to find gaps or whatever. I expect that based on the lack of success of the previous caravan, that they're probably going to try something else. And I'm thinking what they're going to do is when they get close to the border, they're going to split up and just start trying to drain the resources at the border and find any open gaps they can, as opposed to just trying to pile into one area where there's a lot of people waiting for them. So some of these people are going to try legitimately to get asylum, and very few of them do because they don't meet the standard for getting asylum. So I would think that the people who either know they can't qualify for asylum, or those who are just people with criminal records, or people who have been deported before, those types of individuals are probably going to try to mosey down the border, probably to the east, and try to move across the border in smaller groups in open areas where they can actually get through. So that, I think, is going to be a little more challenging, stopping this group or these new groups that are coming. But we've got 4,350 plus the border security plus the DHS is down there, so the DEA is probably down there. So there's a lot of resources down on the border. But this is again, this timing of all this is probably going to coincide pretty neatly with the 15th of February, when the deadline comes for this committee in Congress to produce the report to the president. And if it does not include a physical barrier, money for a physical barrier, he's likely not going to sign the bill, in which case he'll resort to some other measure. He has several options to go ahead and get the funding and get the wall built. It's being built right now. I mean, they're actually working on it right now. He's already tapped into, I think it's like over $500,000 of DHS money he's already tapped into. So they're working on the wall right now, but there needs to be a much larger amount of cash there, and a much larger effort by multiple companies building at the border to get it done. And so this is all going to coincide here in about 2 weeks as the first of these new caravans hit the border. It's going to be play into Trump's hand, because it's going to point out again that we do have these massive amounts of people coming to the border in large groups trying to rush the border, and this is only going to highlight the nature of the problem that we're dealing with, and will play very much into Trump's hand. I think he'll be sitting in a very good position however he chooses to get this done. And I think he'll have a lot of support, majority of support from people in the country. And I think that, as I said last week, Trump playing the long game, this is a big win. This will be a big win for Trump, and it's going to end up being a very embarrassing loss for Madam Botox and any Democrats who hold the line with her. Well, this attorney, Len Wood, and his legal team, which I understand consists of 7 other attorneys, have sent out over 50 legal notices this past week, to media organizations, politicians, celebrities, and reporters. And this is in regards to the Nicholas Sandman situation, who was one of the kids at Covcath High School in northern Kentucky. So the letters that went out were preservation orders. These are letters that are sent out to inform the recipients of them not to destroy any documents in connection with the case. These letters were sent to, as I said, more than 50, and he says there'll be even more. This was just the first batch that went out. Some of the people receiving those preservation orders were Washington Post, NPR, Andrea Mitchell, Joy Reid, Chuck Todd, The Hill, The Atlantic, GQ Magazine, The Guardian, TMZ, Aaron Burnett, David Brooks, Bill Maher, HBO, Elon Omar, Kathy Griffin, and many more. And there will be more coming up in the next couple days throughout this week. They'll be sending out more of these letters. And so when you're talking about these types of preservation orders, this would entail anything that would involve any communications about the subject being Nicholas Sandmann. So that means that any personal emails that were sent by any of these media figures or organizations or politicians, they must preserve it. They can be requested at the time of discovery or at any time during the criminal trial, or in this case a civil trial, which could also lead to criminal violations depending on what comes out in the civil hearing. And this is very important because what this means is that at some point when this case finally moves into the courts, and I expect that there'll be quite a few, a lot probably, of these individuals, especially these big media organizations who do not want the negative publicity. There's a very good chance many of them are going to just reach a settlement and find out how much they have to pay Mr. Wood to satisfy his client. How much are they going to have to pay to make this thing go away? You'll have a few people who will probably try to fight it, but I think you're going to see a lot of settlements. This is going to end up being a very large settlement. It's going to be a class action lawsuit, obviously, and it's going to be a very, very large settlement. I'm thinking into the 8 figures, tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. It's hard to say exactly how much, but I hope some of these cases do go to trial, just for the reason that we will get to see all these emails that were being launched back and forth between all of these people to one another. Because you can imagine, I mean, we know what they said in the broadcast or on their Twitter feeds. Just imagine what they said to one another in these emails. Well, the Democratic whip was on with Maria Bartiromo this morning. And of course, pretty good interview. He's from Michigan, a rep from Michigan. And he says that border walls, where they're needed, make sense. So here we now have the number 3 man in the for the Democrats in the House, which means you have Steny Hoyer, the number 2 guy. Now you have the number 3 guy. We know from last week reporting there's 35 to 40 Democrats who've said yes, they would support voting for the wall. So it looks like to me that they have to be getting pretty damn close to having enough votes to get this through the House. And I can imagine if the votes are there that Nancy Pelosi would keep the bill from coming up. I mean, she can do that, obviously. She controls what comes to the floor. But if it became known, and it certainly would be, that the votes were there to pass this bill out of the House, which includes border wall funding, and Nancy would not even allow it to come up for a vote, that would be politically extremely damaging, and it would be very divisive within the party. It would almost be like Pelosi and the leadership of the Democratic Party, the top leadership, because we know the number 2 and number 3 Democrats in the House are okay with the border wall funding. What this would be saying is that Nancy Pelosi would be saying to 40, 50, however many Democrats, including the 2 people right below her in the House, we really don't care about your circumstances. My political win is more important than all of your re-elections, more important than the border, more important than the issue, more important than getting anything for the Dreamers or anything else. It's all about me and protecting me because I'm dug in and I can't back down. And that's essentially what that would be saying. So we'll have to keep watching to see if Nancy Pelosi can stand the heat and if she's stupid enough, pig-headed enough, to go ahead and hold the line, knowing good and well that there may very well be the votes, enough Republican and Democrat votes in the House to get this bill passed and out of the House. That will be a very tricky political move for Nancy Pelosi, and we'll just have to see if she. I mean, she's in a tough position. She drew the line in the sand, and now she's got defectors on her side. Public opinion is now against her. She's taken a personal hit in the polls and has not recovered. Trump took a hit in the polls and he has recovered. It's ultimately going to be a win for Trump because he's going to get the wall regardless. Attempting to fight it in the courts will only continue the frustration, aggravation, and the upsetting nature of the issue with a lot of Latinos and with Hispanic people. And because they're very tuned into this issue, they're watching very closely what's going on. I don't see any way for Pelosi or Schumer, quite honestly, but it's mainly Pelosi at this point. She seems to be the one driving the train. I don't see how she gets out of this without taking a pretty good nicking in this deal. And it seems to me she'll be better off and will probably start polling better and actually look better if she would back off and allow this bill to... She can vote against it personally, but she should allow it to come to a vote and at least always have the vote, regardless of whether the votes are there or not. If she does not allow a vote to come to the floor, regardless of what the vote count is, I think that, and she tries to hold the line here, I think she's going to pay a heavy political price, and it's going to cause a lot of Democrats to pay a very heavy political price in the upcoming midterm or 2020 elections, which are not too far down the road. So we'll just keep watching and see whether or not Pelosi is going to get a grip and realize that she may have to take a personal hit in order to benefit her party and all these Hispanics and everyone else. So we're going to see how hard-headed Nancy Pelosi is and what kind of a price she's going to pay as a result. Uh-oh. The Mueller witch hunt is based on the false narrative that the Russians hacked the DNC in 2016 to help Trump win the presidency. That's the narrative. That's the reason for the Mueller probe. But the evidence clearly shows that the Rotten Reverend Clinton's email system was hacked in 2011 and that Hillary was warned about it at that time. Hillary and the FBI have been trying to cover this up along with their corporate media allies. The fact is that we don't know if the Rotten Reverend Clinton, the DNC, or Podesta's emails were hacked at all in 2016 by the Russians or anyone else. It's much more likely that the emails that were leaked to WikiLeaks were the result of an inside job. More than likely, it was a disgruntled Bernie Sanders supporter that wanted to get even. CrowdStrike, who gave us the Russian narrative, has serious credibility issues, and they have serious political bias. They were brought in by Mr. Sussman from Perkins Coie, Hillary's lawyers. It's very likely that Roger Stone's lawyers are going to exploit this situation in the discovery process. They're going to question CrowdStrike and the original narrative. I can assure you of that, because I've seen Stone's lawyer on TV talking about it. The Rotten Reverend, Huma Abedin, and Sidney Blumenthal were victims of phishing attacks as early as 2011, according to the FBI's own documents, and media reports back this up. So, the FBI and others knew that the Rotten Reverend Clinton was using a private email server as early as 2011. Why did the FBI fail to mention this in their 2016 investigation? Did the Rotten Reverend and Huma fall for a phishing scam in 2011 like Podesta did in 2016? The Mueller witch hunt should be shut down, and the top brass at the FBI should be questioned and forced to explain themselves. Yes, this is all true, and of course that doesn't even bring into play the fact that we know that the IC, the Inspector General for the intelligence community, we know that he said, hey, Clinton is being not just hacked, but the Chinese are on her system in real time. They live on Hillary Clinton's email server. Charles McCullough was the Inspector General for the intelligence community. And he was sitting there looking at it. The Chinese were on the Rotten Reverend's server. He made that aware to people. And people in his higher up chain of command said, well, she's probably going to be president, so you better shut up. Or as soon as she comes in, she'll fire you. And then, of course, they did their number on him, and Mr. McCullough went away. The report got buried. Peter's been Stokeris was supposed to be briefed on it, as was McCabe. They don't seem to have any recollection of much about it. They didn't do any damn thing about it. Even though they knew that the Chinese were living on the Rotten Reverend Clinton server in real time. Yeah, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about that, Mr. Barr. Huh. Well, the State of the Union is going to be tomorrow night. I'm looking forward to that. And what I'm most looking forward to is Nancy Pelosi's face, her facial reactions, and the way she's going to be twitching and twisting in her chair as Trump plays out the State of the Union. I'll be watching Trump, but believe me, I'll have one eye on Trump. I'll have one eye on Pelosi. Watching the crazy facial expressions that's going to come across her face and the way she'll be twitching, and she's going to be extremely uncomfortable, and I think Trump's going to do a great job on the State of the Union. It's generally not a political speech, so I don't think he's going to get very political, but it's kind of in Trump's nature to be a little political, so I think you'll get some of that, but mostly I think he's going to focus on what the State of the Union should be, which is the State of the Union. He's going to lay out about a half a dozen different objectives for the country under his leadership, and he's going to tell us how things are going and what his plans are going forward for the next 2 years. So I expect he'll give a very good speech, a very solid speech. He's certainly going to talk about border security. I'm sure that'll be the first thing he talks about, and that's going to make Pelosi and a lot of Democrats very nervous. I do expect that the Democrats are going to act up. I expect them to do some things out there in the audience. I expect them to do some things to be a bit disruptive and disrespectful. That's to be expected. So, we'll all watch it and we'll see what happens there. But, the fact of the matter is he's the president. He's got the bully pulpit. The State of the Union is, one of the most watched speeches, political speeches on the planet. People all around the world will be watching. Trump has fans all around the world. And it's going to be a very big night for the president. And I'm looking forward to the speech. I'm sure a lot of you are as well. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Well, this woman, Kathy Tran, who was the one who introduced this bill for post-birth abortions, which of course was supported by the Virginia governor, Ralph Northam. So she introduces the bill, which Northam comes out and obviously will sign if it passes. It did not pass, so he could not sign it into law, but he basically comes out and defends this post-birth abortion bill that she introduces that ends up failing. But then this whole college yearbook with his blackface routine comes out, and then she tweets out that he needs to resign. So essentially she kind of turns on him. 3 days before, he was out there making the case for her bill. Then the blackface thing comes out and she turns on him. Well, surprise, surprise. It looks like the voters of Virginia have now turned on Kathy Tran, and she is now getting inundated with calls for her to resign for introducing a bill that would legalize infanticide. What a dirty bunch of birds here, man. These are some very sick people. Very sick people. You find a lot of them in the Democratic Party, do you not? Look around. It's the party of one flew over the cuckoo's nest. And Madame Botox is like Nurse Ratched. My goodness. Trump was interviewed on Deface the Nation. Deface the Nation. CBS. And just a couple of comments on his interview. He was asked about whether or not he'll shut down the government. On the 15th, he said he would not take that option off the table. He was asked about what he thinks about Nancy Pelosi and her negotiating and this and that and the other thing. Of course, he went on a diatribe, a very honest diatribe, and laid out a beautiful case for exactly what Nancy Pelosi is all about. Essentially saying that negotiations with Nancy are fruitless because Nancy doesn't care about border security, and she's all about politics. Dead on. Then he was being grilled over the fact that he's had disagreements with the intelligence officials, and he says he can disagree with intelligence officials if he wants to. And he said that soon they will have 100% eliminated the caliphate in Syria, and at that time all the troops will be coming home. He said we need to get out of endless wars. Absolutely right. He sounds like Ron Paul. He was taken to task again about members of Congress disagreeing with him pulling out in Afghanistan, to which point he replied, yeah, I ran against 19 of those guys and I won. He said, I ran on getting out of the endless wars. He's exactly right. He also reiterated that being in Iraq, going to Iraq, was a mistake. He's absolutely right. Based on lies. Then he was asked about whether or not he trusts his intelligence officials. And he said that he trusts his intelligence people, his intelligence that he's got there. So he obviously has put some of his own personal intelligence people in these theaters that he trusts. And essentially then he went on to remind Deface the Nation that the intel in Iraq, they got it wrong. There was no WMD. And he also said that he thinks that Barr will do a great job as the new Attorney General. I sure hope so. I just hope he does the damn job. We have Kamala Harris, who started her political career in the bedroom of Willie Brown, the former San Francisco mayor, attending fundraisers out in Hollywood, 2 major fundraisers out in Hollywood. This is the Hillary crowd. It's starting to look something like maybe that Hillary is running again in 2020, but using Kamala Harris as a proxy, because Kamala Harris is going to the same donors that would normally be behind the Reverend. So she's in Hollywood with the usual suspects doing these 2 big fundraisers. So these Hollywood types are putting out the big bucks for Harris. The event was, of course, hosted at the home of Universal Pictures' Jeff Shell in Beverly Hills. Makes sense. We have a former anti-Trump DOJ prosecutor telling Joy Reid that Mueller will indict Trump Jr. for lying to Congress. He says that Mueller has used leverage against using people's kids against people as leverage to get to his target. And he says, as in the case of Michael Flynn, yeah, you want to go after the president's kid, you better have you better have your act together there. And remember, eventually this thing's going to be over, and when it is, the president's going to remember you went after his kids. Better be careful with that one. We also have McClatchy is following in the footsteps of BuzzFeed and announcing layoffs. The first round of layoffs will be 10%. This follows last year's layoffs at McClatchy of 3.5% of their workforce. We also have Gannett and Vice Media are also announcing layoffs. The reason for all these layoffs? Declining revenues. Declining revenues. No one's watching, listening, or reading them anymore, because they're fake news. Governor Northam received $2 million from Planned Parenthood. Yeah, right along with many, many other high-powered Democrats. If you look at the amount of money that Planned Parenthood receives in donations and where that money goes, 95% of their money goes into the pockets of powerful Democratic politicians, both in the federal Congress and in the state Congresses across the country. They give their money to the top-tier political leadership of the Democratic Party. They're all bought and paid for by Planned Parenthood, who started out as a bunch of eugenicists, and who are, at their heart, eugenicists. Well. Thank you so much for your participation for this week's Dumbass of the Week. You know, there was several candidates for Dumbass of the Week this week, but there was, Governor Northam. He was just had too much game for anybody else to even get close to him. I mean, it's nearly impossible to beat someone with that much game. I mean, he shows up on Tuesday in the week, making a defense on a radio program for post-birth abortion. Then this picture in the yearbook comes out. First, he admits it's him. Then he denies it's him. Then he says he's not sure if it's him. It's hard to know what's going on with this dude. Then he says he thinks that it will be a good play to say, oh, well, I used to put on blackface and dance like Michael Jackson. Somehow he thinks that was somehow a good way to get out of this situation. This man is clearly a dumbass. He is a dumbass. He is the poster boy for Dumbass of the Week. He literally, the trophy should be a trophy of his head. A bust of Ralph Northam would be the Dumbass of the Week award itself. That's how dumb this guy is. He had some competition, though. I mean, of course, Pelosi obviously had a few gaffes this week. CNN certainly coming out, and at first when they brought the story out, they suggested that Northam was a Republican. I'm sure that was just an accident. Not the first time we've seen that happen. It's CNN or MSNBC. That happens regularly with them. Then, of course, we had the Rachel Maddow's crazy segment, which I didn't even have time to comment on, about what she went off on this segment and this sort of crazy idea that the Russians could take out the power grid in the middle of a winter vortex, polar vortex, or Arctic blast of air or whatever. I mean, the woman's nuts. The woman is absolutely nuts. Lost her mind a long time ago. Trump derangement syndrome hit her hard, I think, on election night. I don't think she's ever recovered. She's been terminal ever since. The woman's a nutcase. She'll end up in a rubber room. I'm serious. Rachel Madcow. The only reason that she's not in a rubber room right now is because she makes tremendous amounts of money. She's probably got therapists. She's got all these people around her that try to comfort her and try to, keep her on the straight and narrow or whatever. But she's a basket case. Absolutely. So let's go down the tally. We have Richard B. voted for Northam, Dumbass of the Week. Patty Willing, Northam. Oregon, the doofus from Virginia. Thesaurus, he of course says Northam could not only be the dumbass of the week, but could be the evil person of the week. He could get both awards for being the most evil and the dumbest person of the week. Yeah, I agree with that. Joe Mack says Northam and CNN again, because the way CNN handled this and continues to handle this story, you certainly have to put them in the box with Northam. Peter, of course, Northam. Rachel, the Rachel Madcow story. I forget who did that. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your commenter's name. But yeah, again, one vote for Rachel Madcow for this crazy story on how Russia could turn off our power grid or something. Just absolutely insane story. I mean, I laughed it off, quite honestly. Jonathan, vote for Northam. Jeanette for Northam. Major Mac, Northam. T.W. Wintex, Northam. Jack Kennedy, Northam. And Mike G. Now, Mike G throws out an interesting one. Remember, Mike's from the UK. And Mike says Theresa May. And very well done, Mike, by the way. Because, in fact, this past week, Theresa May did, in fact, reject her own Brexit deal. Theresa May, maybe we have to have a separate UK dumbass of the week or something. But certainly Theresa May is we generally don't include Brits too much in this, or Europeans or whatever. But, certainly she would be a candidate in many of these past weeks for dumbass of the week. Yes, no question about it. Theresa May, quite the dumbass. Doesn't even support her own Brexit deal. William is an idiot, voted for Pelosi. And, of course, Pelosi, her comments on Northrop, like a lot of Democrats initially, was said they didn't know anything about it until they got the word on what they were supposed to do. And when they got the word that they were supposed to oppose him, which many Democrats are now, saying he has to step down. He's still refusing to step down, by the way. Ultimately will be the voters in Virginia, his constituents, that'll make that decision. And I believe that within probably the next couple of days, it'll be too overwhelming for him within his own district, and he'll probably. I'm certain he won't last the week. I'd be very surprised if he lasts the week. If he does, then his constituents in Virginia are some very troubled people, that they would put up with this. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, the stuff about the blackface and being in the thing with being in the pic with the KKK guy, and the way he handled it, and he admitted to it, apologized for it, then he walked it back, just said he wasn't there, then maybe he was there. I mean, you don't know if he was in the costume or. I mean, it's. That didn't bother me so much. Not that I'm not bothered by the whole idea of KKK and the racism and stuff. It's not that doesn't bother me. What bothered me, I guess, I was looking at it, comparing it, and paling it in comparison to what the real big problem for me was the coming out and endorsing post-birth abortion. To me, post-birth abortion is like on a scale of 1 to 1,000, it's like 1,000,000. And painting up his face, blackface, posing in a picture or whatever. Put that, in the kind of medium range. It's just, it's not good. It's not. You want to see it, but nothing in comparison to coming out and endorsing post-birth abortion. I mean, that's just, to me, off the charts. I mean, it's infanticide. So when you total it all up, there's absolutely no doubt, and it wasn't even close. Like last week was fairly close. Most weeks it'll be very close. You have 2 or 3 top contenders. But this week there was just no competition whatsoever for Governor Northam. He overwhelmingly wins. No one even close. First place for Dumbass of the Week, Governor Northam. And then we have 3 individuals tying for second place. That would be Madam Botox, Pelosi, CNN, and Theresa May. All tying for second place with 1 vote each. But overwhelmingly, no question, I think it was pretty easy this week, because it's not always easy. There's usually some pretty close competition. Northam. But, there's another character who I think could have probably been suggested as Dumbass of the Week. It would have rivaled, not Northam himself, but certainly would have rivaled a lot of the people for Dumbass of the Week. And that would be the campaign chairman for Ed Gillespie, which is the Republican that ran against Northam. And in that race, Northam accused Gillespie and Republicans in general of being racist. He's the one that ran that ad in Virginia showing the redneck truck with the Confederate flag in the window or whatever, running over black people. And then we come out and see this hypocrisy. And generally when you're running against someone, you do your opposition research. You usually hire a professional firm to do that. And one of the very first things they do is go back to that person's beginning of adulthood when they're 18. They start with the time that person's 18, and they investigate everything, which means going to the college or going to where they were when they were 18, going to look at any police records, any court records, anything like that, and they start digging deeply into the past. They always go for things like yearbooks. I mean, look what they did to Kavanaugh. They went and got his yearbook. These are easy ones. These are really, really easy ones because you can go back and find something that somebody said or did back when they were a very young person at a time the times were different, standards were different and all sort of things. It's easy to take something from the past and bring it forward to the future and to modern times and drop that on somebody and make things look really bad or whatever. This is generally not something that you would miss. And even Dan Bongino says that during the general election there, that someone actually did send him this photo of Northam. So I would have to say that another candidate for Dumbass of the Week could have been the campaign manager for Ed Gillespie. Gillespie should have gotten this. He should have gotten this, especially, with the way that race was run and Northam accusing Gillespie of being a racist, running that terrible ad and all these things. Had they got that yearbook, college yearbook, and had that photo and had what we have now, that would have totally blown him up. Not only just for what he did, but as a hypocrite. And I'm very surprised that got by the campaign team, the campaign manager of Gillespie. So, you have to almost give an honorable mention to the campaign manager for Ed Gillespie in the 2016 governor's race in Virginia. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. And, of course, I guess maybe next time I see you, we'll be talking. Well, no, it'll be Wednesday. Wednesday, I guess, we'll be talking about the State of the Union. So, back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Have a good night. Bye.